Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And now, the final list. The most important and likely the one that's going to get the most hot debate. The top 25 albums of 2014. The cream of the crop, the best of the best. Some of these entries you will already recognize that they've already received plenty of critical acclaim elsewhere, but there are a few surprises on this list that definitely do deserve their due consideration. Now, one thing to preface this list going forward. While I have seen many year-end lists, these are all my personal choice based on what stuck with me the most throughout the course of 2014. And to qualify, they've got to be one of the 210 records that I covered this year. And believe me, this list had a few really painful cuts to get it down to 25, but I prefer to keep this list smaller and respect just the cream of the crop rather than reward albums that might not deserve that same level of august critical acclaim. But you've all seen the reviews, enough wasting time. Let's get this started. Number 25. The first album on this list is from an unsigned artist, and yet if you listen through this album in its entirety, you never know. She beat out plenty of releases that had more marketing and money behind them, and for good reason, because she definitely deserves a slot on this list because this album is great.
Because that man is hotter than a lighted cigarette, faster than your old-time cat and haunt you like a ghost. And he'll promise you the moon and then he's gonna make you think you're the only one. I ought to know better, but somehow I never learned.
Seemingly from out of nowhere, Jonas dropped a dark, precisely framed, incredibly detailed country record that isn't afraid to sketch out some real stories of desperate figures trying to claw together something of value in their lives. Even the bitter tone and self-awareness means that few of these stories will ever have a happy ending. What this results in is an album that can be a little bit abrasive in its embrace of reality, yet all the more potent, especially with this very intimate presentation, and Jonas's quiet vocals placed very close to the front of the mix. It's a sort of independent debut album that comes out of nowhere. It's a little bit intimidating to really delve into, but if you take the time to really take in these stories, I promise it's worth the wait. Number 24. It dropped late in the year, but I'll be damned if it doesn't make my list. Funk and soul-inspired R&B rarely ever sounds this good. You know what, this is a fantastic year for R&B, and D'Angelo's long-awaited and yet still kind of surprising return was one of the best moments to cap it off. Experimental as instrumental flourishes that recalls a lot of Prince, incredibly textured with every flutter of the guitars and the keys, D'Angelo went beyond his typical slow jams and sex into material that was sharply political and all the more relevant in a way that recalls Sly and the Family Stone's There's a Riot Going On from the early 70s, and its embrace of darker subject material and rougher edges. Sensual without needing to be explicit, passionate without needing rage, explosive without needing fire. Black Messiah is a slow burn that reveals more and more to like about it with every single listen. It shows that if D'Angelo's gonna spend 14 years working on an album, he's gonna goddamn make sure that it was well worth the entire wait. Number 23. On premise alone, I'd be inclined to at least recognize this record. I mean, the ambition behind it's pretty damn impressive, and while I can't exactly say they pulled it off entirely, the fact that they managed to still create some amazing music that fit in with it along the way, goddamn incredible.
As time goes by, I hide the truth. Cannot stand myself with a broken shell.
While I'm still not sure it's quite Epica's best work, it's definitely one of their most ambitious, intelligent, and difficult albums to date, trying to quantify the struggle to understand and quantify unknowable truths and how the human mind just can't really take it. It's a record careening on the edge of madness, and it knows it, and the operatic, symphonic scope only emphasizes how close to the brink they really are. The fact that Epica finally got a handle on solid hooks and managed to bring together a really rich symphonic backdrop is all the better here, and a good sign the band might still have better dreams than even this. And believe me, I'll be excited where they take those dreams if they ever do. Number 22. In the wake of Florida Georgia Line's success, Nashville seems to be struggling to find a country duo with the chops and the personality to really match them. And yet this year, they didn't just find a match, but one of the best albums of the year.
Before I was delivered, I fingered that trigger and the wine from her body, how it flowed. Then I gathered myself with the rage of hell, went back to the city, man. made of gold.
Of the two records that Sundy best dropped this year, Bring Up the Sun was the easy highlight. A sophomore release that found the middle ground between ruckus pounding energy and lyrical ambition to go deeper and darker. Of their three releases, it's also their darkest, showing a willingness to take their hefty guitars, groove heavy riffs, and pair it with real songwriting that soared leaps and bounds ahead of their competition, and to earnest, occasionally very raw songs that knew how to grab me painfully every single time. And yet it's the cajon that raised this album into real greatness, giving the record a pounding, relentless momentum and personality unlike any others. Who would have known that a well-made wooden box could mean so much? But either way, Bring Up the Sun, it earns it. Number 21. This is a year where hip-hop really turned on itself, the underground elements skewering their mainstream counterparts with increasingly vicious stabs. And yet, there was one album that wanted to play both sides against the middle, and guess what? It ended up on this list.
She don't need you for shit but your dick and your veins and your guts and your... Every man sees she thick and they wish they could bang when she stressed. She got...
The fact that a noise rap trio could have any crossover appeal at all, it's kind of amazing to me. The fact they did it while still bringing an impressive standard of lyrical wordplay, thematic cohesion, and more refined instrumentation than ever was damn near incredible. Daveed Diggs continues to be a revelation behind the microphone, with the sort of electric charisma that grabs a hold of listeners with every sneering lyric, and with production that balances out between eerie noise, industrial sounds, and a creaking skeleton of mainstream hip-hop. It's a record that's willing to play the game to highlight every dark, depraved moment of it, and both revel and mercilessly savage it. If you're looking for an accessible noise rap record that still delivers some real quality behind it, you need to pick up the self-titled record from Clipping, because with every release, these guys keep getting better. Number 20. And to think I only picked up this album out of sheer desperation and boredom in the doldrums of summer, and yet it turned out to be one of the most thought-provoking and yet fun albums of this year.
If I know you couldn't swear, we'd never gone in. I left my own river.
You know, on the surface, the self-titled record from Canadian band Always might appear to be just another retro-leaning, reverb-swelled indie rock debut with irrepressibly catchy hooks and a lightweight vibe. But Always has a much more sly intention as it subverts that breezy tone for a record about the internal crises of people in my generation trying to figure out what the hell they want out of relationships, even as their ironic detachment and shallowness drags them deeper into replicating the same lives that they hate. It's a refreshingly smart, genuinely charming record that isn't afraid to have some real teeth behind it when it could have just coasted by on retro cool and affectations, with the perfect dichotomy between subtlety, instrumentation, and lyrics that reveal the underlying neuroses and panic behind those cheerful smiles. Always made an absolutely essential debut album, and it'll be interesting where they take it from here. Damn good work, guys. Number 19. This is one of the most criminally underrated albums of the year, and probably the biggest surprise for me. I mean, a pop country record that tries to fill the void of Taylor Swift from a teen soap opera starlet. How could this possibly be any good?
Baby, it's you. I remember when I hear that song, singing out the chorus till your voice was gone. It's you. I remember every time I hear that song.
Well, I'll tell you how. It got there by taking the established conventions of pop country and refining them down to a purely melodic, excellently written, and very well performed record. Losing Hale's Road Between was an incredibly welcome surprise for me this year, with vocals that brought a lot of maturity, instrumentation that brought a pop-friendly yet still very much neo-traditional country flavor, and lyrics that rose leaps and bounds beyond what is ever expected in this subgenre. For a pop country record to speak with such candor and nuance about young women and their expectations and drives in today's society, while still pairing it with a considerable slice of genuine teenage passion, it's exceptional. And Road Between definitely deserved a lot more attention. If you haven't heard it, check it out. Number 18. It took her 5 years and many singles, but she finally managed to pull it off. And while it's not quite her best, it was still enough to earn a slot on this list.
Life lying before and after in an instant of great white gravity. Hold tight, 'cause all is against me. Every cell in my body breaks.
Record Records that normally have as long of a release run as Sparks did tend to feel a little bit disjointed, but Imogen Heap brings her top-class production, superb writing, and powerful melodic brand of indie pop for her best release since Speak For Yourself. A record highlighting those potent yet fragile flickers of feeling that can either sputter out in the vast emptiness or be ignited into something really potent, returning to the potential emotional drama that always anchored her best work with indie pop instrumentals that are quite literally pushing the boundaries when it comes to this brand of electronica enhanced music with phenomenal organic texture. Imogen Heap proves that why she's one of the most recognizable, eclectic, and amazing indie pop artists to ever create a spark. Number 17. And yet on the other end of the spectrum, while Imogen Heap embraces technology to create her soundscapes, this artist goes for something on the reverse. More dark, heavy, and just as powerful. Now this album has already gotten loads of critical acclaim, and for damn good reason, as St. Vincent takes the inward focus of her previous works and takes her snarl brand of weirdness into the world at large, which oddly makes her stand in even harsher contrast to it. The riffs are nastier, the instrumentation is more alien, the vocals are very dispassionate, and her songwriting is more oblique, and yet no less biting as she tears into the society that would strip away raw, untamed, organic feeling for rigid precision. This record perfectly captures that tension, and while I'd argue it's not quite the gut punch as Strange Mercy, it's still easily one of the best albums of the year. Number 16. Okay guys, you all knew this was coming. The fact that Jack Antonoff not only managed to match, but actually surpass his bandmates in fun with his debut album is nothing short of astounding. Strange Desire is a messy, fragmented record, mostly a reflection of its piecemeal construction and the fact that it's dealing with the confusion and panic that one might feel that comes with an old flame returning to your life for all of the wrong reasons. At the end of the whole whirlwind story here, where Bleachers drags us through the annals of 80s synthpop at its absolute best, Jack Antonoff might not have won the girl in the end, but he did find some brand of inner peace, which really was what mattered. Perfectly framed, excellently written, and Jack Antonoff bringing a surprising amount of real personality and charisma to the table. It shows that if Fun ever manages to get that third album together, Nate Ruess might actually have to share the spotlight. Number 15. Now, for a long time, I questioned whether or not this album would stick along long enough to land on this list, or whether I just overrated it when I listened through it the first couple of times. And yet, after many, many re-listens, I stand by my case, and this album remains on this list. Now, there were a lot of people, including a lot of critics, who unfairly dismissed Temples as a backwards-looking retro act making derivative copies of 60s psychedelic pop rock. The funny thing is that Temples is well aware of their sound's origin, and thus they aimed darker, walking the tightrope between the rich, sunny feel to some of the psychedelic melodies and the heavy or organic depth of the production and especially the lyrics, taking tight melodic grooves and marrying it to a richly textured mix and lyrics that seem to darkly question the band's place in time if they have one at all. Sunstructures by Temples remains one of the most cohesive and memorable records of this year. Sometimes, by remembering one's history, they can actually come to surpass it. Number 14. Now, St. Vincent wasn't the only artist this year to turn her gaze outward to powerful effect. But while she was writing about technological dehumanization and how to recover from it, this artist had a much more personal stake, and it proved all the more powerful.
No family is safe when I sashay.
Mike Hadrius' raw intensity has always been one of his strongest assets in the striking piano ballads that began his career, but Too Bright shows him reflecting it all back on the world. And with operatic scope, grander instrumentation, and lyrics that proves all too willing to throw everything on the line, listeners be damned, he made with something both grandiose and yet uncomfortably raw. He displaces his fear, knowing how its root causes are outside of him, and forces those who would drive him down to face their own deeply held insecurities, if they even can. The fact that he fused it with some of the most breathtaking breathtakingly gorgeous and genuinely chilling instrumental moments of this year is absolutely mind-blowing, and it easily made Too Bright a contender for this list. Damn good work. Number 13. Of all the records that I've listed thus far, most are pretty easy listen. They might make you uncomfortable for a couple moments with the subject matter and some of the presentation, but you know what? They're accessible enough. This album is the direct opposite, a labyrinthine behemoth that demands attention, and for good reason.
I am not fine. I am not.
This year, Michael Gier took his gargantuan sounds and he made them colossal, drenching them in blacked out blues rock, washed out noise, and the pummeling no-wave grooves that made him famous in the first place. A 2.5-hour long monstrosity in form and substance that aims to tap in for something different. Really to tap into those primal, deep-seated emotions where one finds childlike fears and wonders. The sounds are so huge because they are designed to draw us back to our past where everything was that huge, that implacable, and that barely understandable. The purity of raw emotion, driven by every cacophonous groove, from chaos to order and back to entropy again, creates a very singular experience, and one that demands a lot of endurance, and while I'm still not sure it's quite better than Children of God or The Great Annihilator, it's still something that must be heard to be believed. Number 12. Hip-hop was in an odd place this year. The mainstream struggled for real identity in the face of social turmoil that many artists did not know how to properly address, and the underground pounced on all those failures. And yet, there was a place for a record that took things back to the old school in the best possible way.
When I hit you up, I'm talking about banging something. Chill off in your crib and have a thing, probably make this thing or something. Girl, you like my bottom, post my bill, pay for my lawyer. Play your position when the mother hoes get out of order.
I'm gonna say it, the pairing of Freddie Gibbs and Madlib was outright inspired. Madlib brings a collection of textured, early to mid-90s sampled beats full of 70s blaxploitation, and Freddie Gibbs rides them better than he's ridden anything else. With this record, not only does he show more versatility as a rapper with pure skill and lyrical construction, he also goes deeper into his own real-life problems and anxieties as a modern-day gangsta, with his father being a crooked cop and his uncle a drug addict, and relationships that have gone sour. In the wake of this year, it feels all the more relevant, but that shouldn't take away from the fact that this is an incredibly solid and compelling record, from the guest stars to the more progressive themes. This isn't just a record that I really do love, and let me stress, I dig the hell out of this, but one I can really respect, and one that shows a collaboration that nobody expected would really work, but paid huge dividends all the same. Number 11. Of course, on the other side of that balance is this record. And really, even though I will say it's a great step in the right direction from their last album, the band that is trying new sounds, I wholeheartedly expect this record to, well, not show up on anybody else's list. And I really couldn't care less, because I absolutely loved it just the same.
Spread your wings and fly. On your way up, you will go on now.
I was not expecting to enjoy Bang by God Hard as much as I did, but called taking a working formula and building off it in the best possible way. But taking steps away from the direct imitation of the late Steve Lee, Nick Mader defined his own identity with the band, who are delving deeper into blues rock and even symphonic music. It's a dirty, rough edge, recklessly fun hard rock record that shows the band on point melodically and even lyrically, showing more nuance than most hard rock bands will ever bring to the table. In a year where so much music was down-tempo and dark or understated and tasteful, God Hard's Bang was an injection of wild, ruckus fun that shows the band operating at their absolute best, and I couldn't ask for anything more. Number 10. Now, this is another album that I'd argue is really underrated, particularly in a year where R&B came back in force, but also a case where I'm not exactly surprised this album might have just missed with some people. It's subtle, it's a slow burn, and when it finally does click, it earns its slot on this list.
Cause where I'm from, we live by the love, die by the love. We live for the love, die for the love.
On the surface, many would deem Jhené Aiko's debut just another R&B record about breakups, but really, it does go a lot deeper than that. Featuring some of the most organic and melodic production in R&B this year, mostly courtesy of No ID, it shows a repeating series of troubled and failed relationships, but frames the struggle through a spiritual breakthrough and renewal that's most reminiscent of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The writing is intricate and layered. Jhené flexes her entire dramatic range in order to sell the complicated framing, and with the instrumentation leaning much more heavily on guitars over keyboards, it's got a unique and beautifully textured flavor that really makes it stand out. Easily my favorite R&B record this year. I'm expecting some great things on the horizon from you, Jhené Aiko. Please don't screw it up. Number 9. Granted, her album wasn't the only record about snapping out of toxic inertia. This one was just a little bit more aggressive about it.
I like for my shoes to look like they've been walked in, my house to look like it's been lived in, my car to look like a coffin that's been driven off a cliff, my career like a non-stop graveyard shift.
The comeback record of the year that nobody expected, Sage Francis delivered some of those well-constructed, frighteningly poignant, and blisteringly honest wordplay that you will hear this year. Every single line dense with detail and wordplay. Of the many hip-hop albums tearing into its own genre this year, Sage Francis was probably the most direct, but his anger was a much wider sweep than societal targets who deserved all the vitriol, including himself in that framing, and against the rough edge and varied production that had a layer of grime and texture, both from the indie rock that he delved into with Life. It was one of the most painfully self-aware shocks to the system that rap music needed this year, and oh dear God did it work wonders. Number 8. There is nothing like this album that I have ever heard. Period. It's not a record that's easily explained and categorized. It was just a shade weaker. I'd probably just be easier to dismiss it as just an oddball vanity project. But as it is, I gotta say it, it's incredible.
Throw me out. I'm already leaving. Or float me down to my reaping.
This album is a labor of love, and you can tell from every single song. Devin Townsend's sci-fi blend of Americana-drenched country in the past with his usual progressive rock and ambient tendencies created a singular entity in music. A record of windswept, creaking texture, atmospheric emptiness, and melodic grooves that only seem to emphasize time slipping away. Coupled with Shay Amy Dorval's haunting vocals and lyrics that show Devin Townsend confronting the roots of his fear itself, it's a record that shows experimentation paying off in the best possible way. I overlooked this album for far too long this year, and I won't be making that mistake again, because it's something special. Trust me on that. Number 7. This is likely to be one of the more contentious additions to this list, specifically from fans of the band. For one, it's a shift in sound towards something that's brighter, more vibrant, maybe even more mainstream-friendly music. But I'll say this, if the mainstream could get music this amazing, I'm sorry, we'd all be better off.
If I could build a bridge between us, arcs of summer rainbows, strength of Mother Earth.
Albums that cross this many genres and sounds as Poets of the Fall do on this record tend to get controversial, but Jealous Gods brings a level of thematic cohesion and larger-than-life production and sweep to back it all up. Not only does it feature lead singer Marco Seresto in top form, it features some of the band's most striking melodies and imagery that they've ever put on record. Yeah, sure, it can be a little bit hyperbolic, but this is a record that's seeking to capture that grand scope of tragedy that's larger than the human experience, relatable through their concept but elevated by their execution. In short, it's an absolutely magnificent record and definitely worth the high praise and a slot on this list. Number 6. Okay, if you talk to a country music critic at all this year, they will have inevitably mentioned this album. So it's pretty much its inclusion on my list. It's pretty much expected. But then again, when it's this great, I'm not exactly about to disagree.
But it ain't all flowers. Sometimes you gotta feel the thorn. When you play with the devil, you know you're gonna get the horn.
Okay, longtime fans of Sturgill Simpson expected that he was going to deliver quality on his sophomore release, but they probably weren't prepared for this, taking his usual brand of dark textures and detail but oblique songwriting and sending them whirling into the void of psychedelic country. With top-of-the-line gritty production from Dave Cobb and Sturgill Simpson's most striking and memorable performance to date, he has definitely earned all that critical acclaim. But there's a lot more beneath the surface in terms of the songwriting and themes surrounding finding love in a world of sin that he handles masterfully. And I would argue that there's even still more room for him to improve and grow as an artist. So you know what? I can't wait for whatever brand of offbeat weirdness that Sturgill Simpson explores next, because I bet it's gonna kick ass. Number 5. Okay, this is another album that's earned all sorts of critical acclaim. In fact, apparently it's the most critically acclaimed album of this year, showing up on more best lists than any other album. You know what? There's a reason for that. This is probably probably the first album from the War on Drugs that can proudly stand on its own without any qualifications surrounding Kurt Vile. And really, the fact that it does hold together as well as it does is in meticulous construction, gorgeous melodies, and precise blend of washed out shoegaze and mid-80s Springsteen-esque roots rock is a testament to its power. Sure, at the end of the day, it's just another record about its author's existential crisis brought upon by breakups and depression, but Adam Granduciel nails the tricky balance between intimate and very populist in crafting his story. This is rock music drenched in Americana mythology and themes, and yet is introspective enough to question them with eyes to the wind, read from what they might see. In other words, fantastic album. Number 4. The fact this guy is, as we speak, one of the highest charting artists in the US, a little baffling to me. And yet to some extent, his existence in this self-titled debut album fills me with a lot of hope. I mean, if this is where the charts are leaning, we could be in for a very good couple of years.
She's gonna save me, call me baby, run her hair through my hair. She'll know me crazy, soothe me daily, but yet she wouldn't care.
Hozier's the sort of singer-songwriter who has such a defiantly unique sound and presence to be instantly recognizable. A potent baritone with a melancholy of soul and the fire of blues rock, a varied sound blending grimy folk, gospel, and even elements of gothic rock into a darkly textured, ominous record that shows themes of human weakness and nihilism that he undercuts with only the faintest glimmers of hope, which are all the more special for their scarcity. Coupled with stellar, detailed, overloaded songwriting that draws from classical mythology, old school blues, and nuanced modern framing, Hozier's self-titled debut is leaps and bounds against so many of his competition, and I can only hope he becomes known for more stateside beyond Take Me to Church, because this album is something really special and powerful. Number 3. You know what? I'm a little surprised this record landed so high for me, but with every single listen, it resonated more and more, and I had to put it here. It's rare to get rap albums that are this cerebral, pointed, cohesive, and relevant, that require this much effort to untangle, but oh wow, it's worth it.
We the best mostly, sometimes the freshest rhymers. We the tightest kind of, respect my qualifiers. Respect my qualifiers, respect my qualifiers, respect my qualifiers, respect my
I've always liked Open Mike Eagle's projects for the straightforward honesty, intelligence, and slightly off-kilter production. But you know what? This is his best work yet. Built around themes of finding some form of connection through some form of dark comedy, it takes some slightly quirky or comedic elements and shows a wealth of deeper meaning behind them, all set against production that alternates between shimmering waves of beauty and some slightly glitchier fragments. Another album openly critical of hip-hop and its culture, Open Mike Eagle goes deeper to discuss society at large, with so much nuance to capture a reality that would less outright scorn his insight than just ignore it, which is the real sad joke. But nobody should ignore this record, not just because it's poignant and vulnerable, but altogether real, but because it's a damn incredible piece of music that's definitely worth your time. Check this out. Number 2. This one topped my list for nearly the entire year. Now, if you watch my mid-year review, you already know what this album is, and there's definitely a reason for it.
And there ain't no conversation between the daylight and the dark. It's a worn out situation when you don't know where you are.
This album is pure country, not traditional or neo-traditional or outlaw or bro country. This album is representative of why I love pure country music in and of itself, and Jason Eady's brand of Texas-flavored wandering is both modern and incredibly real, drenched in whiskey, heartbreaks, and the line we all walk between good and evil. Earnest yet painfully self-aware, rough-edged but with moments of real vulnerability, with fantastic textures but some genuinely gripping melodies. This is an album that doesn't really jump out at you or get in your face, and if it wasn't for a few nitpicks that I have with a couple songs, it was damn close to a perfect record for me and easily the best country album of this year. And yet, there was one album that managed to somehow top it, and believe me, it was right down to the wire. And here it is. Number 1. The fact that this album is topping my list should not surprise anyone. Hell, it's topping a lot of people's list. And there are times where I disagree vehemently with critics, but you know what? This isn't one of them. And at this point, you all know what it is.
Run them jewels fast, run them jewels fast, run them, fuck the slow-mo.
I'll be honest, originally I didn't think they could pull this off. The first Run the Jewels album was exceptional, a hard-edged barrel of smart rhymes, great production, and two MCs that played off each other masterfully. And then Run the Jewels 2 managed to top it in every single way somehow. Harder, faster, stronger, better guest stars, more varied, layered, and explosive production, and content that showed Killer Mike and LP unafraid to get political in a year where hip-hop needed to be. But even putting aside how shockingly relevant and righteous this album feels in 2014, to overlook the sheer craftsmanship, the technical wordplay where artists can swap out for each other effortlessly, the interweaving punchlines, the creativity and sense of humor that can remain progressive and yet relentlessly juvenile and fun and make it all somehow cohesive, this is a goddamn masterpiece. Honestly, I could go on for days about this album. The masterful samples, the genre-pushing sound, the righteous fury behind it that's backed up with real intellect and raw emotion. But at the end of the day, my pick of Run the Jewels, it should be self-explanatory and self-evident if you've heard the album, because this record is the burst of violent life that 2014 needed. And to top it off, next year we're getting a remix album full of cat songs called Meow the Jewels. Who can top that? Run the Jewels 2 by Run the Jewels, top album of 2014. LP, Killer Mike, you guys are on the way to becoming legends. You can pick up that crown now if you want to. But until next year, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Post. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.